Hiya, I'm your host Terry J. Ullman with Strange Fire, self-titled No Gods, Indian Saints, Rites of Passage, Swampophilia, Shaming the Sun, Back on the Bus, Heel, 1200 Curfews, Come On Now Social, and all that we let in. This episode of Video Fuzzy, the soundtrack, is brought to you by the Indigo Girls. Hit it! Oh, right. Hi there. Couple things different with this installment. Usually my entries driven by the alphabet, all the artists in my collection that start with letter A or letter C or so forth. Generally, that's the format. Artists with multiple LPs in my collection are generally featured in a category called influences, which has generally worked just fine. But with the Indigo Girls, with no fewer than 7 LPs in my collection, as well as a few singles from other releases, and a friggin' VHS tape of concert recordings, just throwing them in with the eyes felt inappropriate. This is new, though I don't know exactly where the cutoff should be. I've got at least 3 LPs each of Bush and Brent Braniff. Evanescence also has 3 LPs in my collection. I have 4 LPs and change by regional singer-songwriter Brenda Weiler. Also kept her in the B's, so she comprises a significant portion of that entry. Hindsight, if I'd managed to secure an interview with Brenda herself, she'd absolutely been her own installment. But for sure, the standard needs to be more than 3 or 4. What does occur to me is I've talked for minutes about why I'm only covering one artist now. Well, okay, 2 artists, this folk rock duo, Amy Ray and Emily Salyers, the Indigo Girls, instead of all the artists in my collection starting with I. And it makes sense because this one is unusual, but going forward, if I have, let's say, 5 or more LPs by any given artist, they get their own episode, rather than overtaking, overwhelming, overpowering a multi-artist entry. And with that over-explained, let's get into this. Hit it! Video Fuzzy, the soundtrack. Episode 10, Caramia. So, for my 10th installment of Video Fuzzy, the soundtrack, I'm actually writing this in Grand Rapids, Michigan, where I was thrilled to witness a live taping of the All About Agatha podcast at Schuler Books. Beautiful space. Guest hosted by events coordinator there, Elizabeth Bosscher, interviewing and sitting in for more usual host, Kemper Donovan, who, well, assuming mics were on, you can hear for yourself how that went, but from where I sat, it sounded fantastic. Kemper spoke for nearly an hour about his, well, it's still new. It was released in January, his debut mystery novel, The Busybody, which last month I shared a review in my more media-focused podcast, Video Fuzzy, episode 92, Reunion. True, I more usually be talking about this there, and I still might, but given the circumstances I'll mention here, there was a good crowd. It went very well. Kemper was in fine voice and form. Old hat by now, probably given he's done a dozen of these already. But this was the first actual interview, and in fact the most he's talked about the busybody he's posted to his podcast, All About Agatha. So when that posts, you should catch it for yourself. Again, it's the All About Agatha podcast. I feel it'll post there soon enough. And now, finally, getting to this podcast, let's talk about the Indigo Girls. I first encountered the Indigo Girls with the release of their music video for Closer to Fine in 1989. The video had them bopping around in an abandoned, I'm gonna hazard, inexpensively accessible places, jamming out here and there with their band suddenly appearing with the flute passage across the bridge, then joined by a group of women there leading down the road. And there wasn't much that the mostly monochrome presentation was going to do by itself, but the song stood out to me. I went to the doctor, I went to the mountains, I looked to the children, I drank from the fountains. There's more than one answer to these questions, pointing me in a crooked line. And the less I seek my source for some definitive, closer I am to find, yeah. Closer I am to find, yeah. I mentioned Edie Brickell a few episodes back, you could check, but trust me, shouldn't be hard to find. This was around when I encountered her talking about philosophy as a walk on the slippery rocks and religion being a smile on a dog. Things you perceive because you want them to be true. Artists were reacting to things like Iran-Contra, the war firing up in the Persian Gulf, and as a young idealist, I was vibing to, well, okay, total honesty, I do remember supporting the war effort. people are allowed to be young and dumb. It was all CNN all the time, and stuff hits different when you draft age. Just saying. It was America's new favorite TV show. Patriot missiles were good. Scud missiles were bad. There was tracer fire. Someone was hiding under a bed. General Schwarzkopf announced we had achieved air supremacy. Honestly, you couldn't have scripted this stuff better. I feel like it must have been part of the inspiration for Wag the Dog. I mean, if media manipulation didn't work, they wouldn't bother with it. Anyway, even so, around this time, I was drawn to these singers, the Indigo Girls, Edie Brickell and Melissa Etheridge and Enya and Sinead O'Connor, all that sort of vibe. While my memory insists I've attended 2 Indigo Girls concerts, one in May of 1995 and one more probably late 90s than abouts, I can only find pictures from the 1995 one, which is fine. It's fun that I have pictures to share at all, and you can check out my Instagram at Video Fuzzy for those and a few I took here from the book event at Grand Rapids. I don't remember much about either of the concerts, but the reason I think I was at a second later concert is I'm remembering Emily doing like a ton of stage riffing, building up huge energy during their performance of Cut It Out, which was off their Shaming of the Sun release in 1997. I wouldn't know she was doing a ton of improvisation if I wasn't familiar with the studio release. So probably I've got a photo album with pics from that in a box somewhere, or it went missing at some point along the way. For sure, it was hard enough to find the pics I found, which were in a box somewhere, and digging them out, I took the opportunity to clear, donate, and toss a whole closet's worth of stuff. If it ever turns up, I'll add them. Now, I started this process off going album to album, but, well, that is how I encountered these artists as they released their LPs and I bought them. We're talking about artists with now more than 80 songs in my collection going back 30 plus years, songs I've been listening to for decades, and Landa Caden says it well enough. Well, the meaning has changed for what it's worth. It's just a senseless game. I'm writing this up now, but I've been puzzling with, 7 LPs plus a bunch of singles. It doesn't really break down in the usual way, and for sure the artists themselves have evolved over the course of their career. I mean, it'd be nuts if they hadn't. Starting with Strange Fire, when my first experience of them I mentioned, there was their self-titled LP. Here, I can weave this much structure back into this effort. Let's just start ourselves off with title track. Caramia is off. I just mentioned it. Their Shaming of the Sun LP, and that was an LP where they really started to say some stuff out loud. It gave us Shed Your Skin, Scooter Boys, Shame on You, It's Alright, Cut It Out, which the live version I heard confronted establishment fixtures and patriarchy, and tucked in among these strident, force-filled songs was this nutty little number, which, honestly, back in October when I knew I'd be talking about them, I reached out on social media to see if anyone was free to chat with a fan in this little podcast. But only 3 episodes of this have had more than 100 downloads. Perhaps, not surprisingly, no response, given that, they're also on tour. But I'd have been interested in talking to someone about this song. Thank goodness for the internet, because otherwise I'd been completely lost. This was an Emily song, per an interview included on Genius Lyrics site, the first she'd ever written on electric guitar, based on, she said it's 2 songs mashed up, which helps to know. She characterizes one part screwed up relationship woven across the second part, a dream her bassist told her about. Caramia, blank notebook on the back pocket fade. You used to mock me, sometimes I would cry when I was home later. You hurt my feelings, why? Write it down in your notebook, I don't wanna be Harriet the Spy. Some say you're a genius, isn't your madness? Will you get better? And then will you leave us? How you mixed with the darkness at such a young age, till in your chemistry silence and violence turn silence to rage. The dream sequence only became clear to me on recent re-listen with the line, "Why are you dreaming this?" The dreamer is missing a shoe with a bridge to cross over. And where is your taxi fare? Are you left by yourself or left by your lover? For 3 nights straight now I've had both of my shoes. And the part of the dream I have totally had myself, where I've forgotten my lines, and I've misplaced my cue, and there's a sea full of faces and a show to go on, and I'm stuck in an entrance with nothing to draw from. There is a lot of imagery crammed into this chorus, which I love the musicality of this song, the longer, almost dreamy waltz-like passages and the urgent quick steps the singer needs to tell you all the things. Case in point, verse the second, where, oh my god, please track this song down and listen to yourself. There is just a shamash of image and concept. The singer expands from the discussion of science to the Big Bang, injustice, philosophy, and the sweaty sheet sex that she's having, and right on back into that dreamscape chorus. I will not do this justice. The song is busy with so many plates spinning at the tops of throwing pins. In the process of being juggled, it becomes a tapestry of sparks and fire. It's weird, right? But that's what compelling means. One is compelled, drawn to explore. I mean, quite honestly, like many such complicated songs, and certainly Indigo Girls songs, the mystery and the meaning and the music doesn't care that I don't know what's going on, and I acknowledge that I really do not need to know what's going on. Musicians who are not top 40 musicians, who do not depend on mainstream airplay for their success, can let their poetry run free, run wherever it wants, inhabit smaller, darker, smokier rooms one ducks into and experiences rather than arenas and stadiums, though they're the Indigo Girls. They do just fine. I was looking at ticket prices ahead of their concert in Minneapolis last month. I'd have been paying more than $1,000 for, pretty good seats, and I love that some of that money goes to excellent causes, but that was not an experience I was going to have. No. Influences. I have, as I said, 7 LPs in my collection by the Indigo Girls and a few stray singles. I'll talk about the LPs first, and then I have more thoughts than I will end up sharing. But I'm afraid this episode might never post, so at some point I just gotta call it. As I mentioned in the intro, I've got their 1987 release, Strange Fire, or their self-titled 1989 LP, Indigo Girls, followed by Nomads, Indians, and Saints in 1990, Rites of Passage in 1992, Swampophilia in 1994, Shaming of the Sun in 1997, and All That We Let In 2004. Strange Fire 1987 is a solid, folk-tinged entry, acoustic guitars powering accompaniment to already confident harmonies. I came to it late, probably around 1990 or so. Certainly after their self-titled release got them on everybody's radar. Probably this can only be known in context, but it's a slow, low-energy burn in which you've got talented songwriters seeking their voice and how best to say what they need to. The title song goes all over the place, coming to you with an offering of strange fire, a sacrifice in the name of love. One thing they never shied away from in their initial releases was their spirituality and the Christian traditions they came up in. Amy Ray said the song grew from her religious studies discussion of Pentecost, the idea that everyone twists everything around to make it say what they want it to, and she admits to a bit of that as well, even if the irony got lost somewhat in how earnest the song ended up being. The 70s-flavored, flute-heavy, crazy game reminds me of old school 1930s era R&B, Peggy Lee and Patsy Cline, sweet little romance. Left Me a Fool performs a post-mortem on a failed relationship. Then we get into some formative chord progressions and I Don't Want to Know, a strong acoustic guitar and harmony, energies built up with the driving harmonica passages installing a structure for this seriously hot bop. Hey Jesus explores the ask versus receive of prayer. Get Together is a decent cover, and Walk Away carries images of broken glass, the moon a sliver in our eyes, wreckage from another relationship. Finally, Make It Easier talks about ordinary people and the economic realities we're stuck in. Okay, with 7 of these and the comments I pulled on singles, this is going to get completely away from me. Suffice to say, when I decided I needed their 1989 self-titled LP in my collection, I was reacting to the jam they put out there with Closer to Fine single, and has discovered a lot of cool, folky vibes on the rest of the cassette. Kid Fear's Dark Reflection, Secure Yourself, meditative vibe, and then there's Blood and Fire. Blood and Fire is this fantastic discussion about actions and consequences. You can have matches, you can have knives, but it's the actions you take that leave you with blood and fire, wounds and pain. You have spent nights thinking of me, missing my arms, but you needed to leave. And I'm calling you from 10,000 miles away. It's the use of the matches and knives that lead to consequences, lead to regret. What did you do? Matches can light a candle, warm a room, they can burn down a home. Knives can help prepare a meal, they can perform surgery and excise contagion, or they can end life. The actions you take define the life you build, the relationship you build, the world you're in. Like the quiet, contemplative nature of that assertion. I'd mentioned their spirituality. Their self-titled LP release was still pretty identifiably Christian. My place is of the sun, and this place is of the dark, and I will not be lukewarm, I will not catch the spark. Some discussion of substance abuse. Someone's on the bathroom floor, doing her cocaine, sliding that in next to someone's got his finger on the button in some room. No one can convince me we aren't gluttons for our doom. They will not be a pawn for the Prince of Darkness any longer. More than spirits, they mark their physical needs as well. Comments in their studio release of Land of Canaan this said, well, the meaning's changed for what it's worth. It's just a senseless game. Spirituality and biblical images of the promised land aside, you can go to the east and find your inner hemisphere. You say we're under the same sky, babe. You're bound to realize, honey, it's not that clear. Nothing so abstract. I'm not your promised land, honey. No, I'm not. I'm not your promised one. I know land of Canaan, oh sweetheart, waiting for you under the sun. Nope, they reject that on the face of it. It's not the fallen man, oh, you know it's not. It's not the call of time. It's just the London skyline, oh sweetheart, telling me you're not mine. Yep, it's focused, in fact, pretty directly on the distance the singer is feeling keenly and is not responsible for. I'm lonely tonight, I'm missing you now. I'm wanting your love, and you're giving it out. I'm lonely tonight, I'm lonely tonight, I'm lonely tonight, ooh, yeah. When 10,000 miles away can indeed be a problem. Then we had nursery rhyme imagery of kings, queens, and jesters in center stage, dark, smoldering chord style, the same kind of low-key edge I run into in Cut It Out, Keeper of My Heart, Pushing the Needle Too Far. I kind of hear the same vibe through 1, 2, 3, and 3 hits to Scooter Boys, absolutely, and I was going to say hand-me-downs off their Nomads, Indians, and Saints released in 1990, but despite the low-slung minor key, the driving energy on that song is actually positive. I've taken so many down, helped them all to dismount. I've followed so many down. I take their hand-me-downs, all with hope that emptiness brings fullness, and loss of love brings wholeness, all with hope that emptiness brings fullness, and loss of love brings wholeness to us all. Swear you can't swim the river, I saw you running to jump in. I swore I'd never be a sinner till I held your sin. Now you ask me why I'm here, same as you, I'm scared it's fear. I've become the beggar now, you become the saint somehow. Twist the words and place the blame, tell me now, aren't we the same? Tripping in our yellow feet, checking underneath our sheets for some hope. Give me hope that emptiness brings fullness, and loss of love brings wholeness. Give me hope that emptiness brings fullness, and loss of love brings wholeness to us all. More than I wanted to quote from that, but there is such a wild energy in that song. Whereas Cut It Out off their Shaming of the Sun collection 1997 is the closest thing I heard to grunge, I think. Again, a couple hashing out their relationship, one in a bar in Alaska. Apparently, as far as an interview quoted on an Angel Fire website, last updated with a song released in 2002 can be trusted. I promise you I would credit it further if I could. Looks like it was originally attached to something called Girls with Guitars, with a separate page broken out for the Indigo Girls, but now it's just a scrap of internet that persists somewhere. Anyway, Sitting in Darwin's Theory. That's the name of the bar in Anchorage, Alaska. First, I'm hearing about it. Thank you, ancient fan-produced website. You're down in the 48, so again, some distance and other issues up for discussion. Can you tell me what happened? Why'd we make it so hard? Cut it out, I'm tender. Give me something good to remember. There are some recurring themes that weave through multiple songs in their catalog. Addiction and substance abuse make multiple appearances through rites of passage, Nomads, Indians, and Saints. The girl with the weight of the world in her hands, keeper of my heart. Even Closer to Fine, a little waking up hungover from a rough night. They did start pushing back against divisive anti-gay rhetoric in It's Alright. It's alright if you hate that way. Hate me 'cause I'm different, hate me 'cause I'm gay. Truth of the matter come around one day, and it's alright. In Trouble, they sing of secret societies, a conference room. I pledge my allegiance to the dollar. When the clergy take a vote, all the gays will pay again. 'Cause there's more than one kind of criminal white collar. And in Shame on You, checkpoints looking for undocumented immigrants. Funny, I think we were on the same boat back in 1694. They were starting to be a little more open about their sexuality too. Again, from Shame on You, a delightfully upbeat song off Shaming of the Sun, 1999. Beautiful ladies walk right by, you know, I never know what to say. And from Trouble, someday the war will stop, and we can grow a peaceful crop, and a girl can get a wife, and we can bring it back to life. I like the opener for that one as well. Trouble came around here. Here in the South, we fix something to eat. You know what? Anytime you've got an actual problem to solve, that's a rational first step. We'll need to work together, most often take some time with it, keep our strength up. Putting food together is an organized way of approaching it. Then there's this speculative bent they explore across a few songs. I'll start with Virginia Woolf, which, not an author I'm especially familiar. I tried reading A Room of One's Own, kept getting distracted by male privilege, and I guess the idea was that conditions of life are such that it was and likely still is rare for a woman to enjoy the freedom of her male contemporaries, often because society provides him with a wife and servants and helpers and lovers and an entire support structure that allows him to spend maybe an entire summer blissfully writing on Walden Pond, while most women have to serve and support all men's needs in some capacity before she can address her own and kids and extended family and the servants. Maybe finally, if there's enough moonlight to write by before she drops exhausted into her bed and the cycle begins all over the next day. Virginia Woolf pointed out that women needed the freedom of responsibilities men take for granted that would allow them the time for writing and reflection. A room of one's own and a pension, I think she said it. It's been a while. In her song, they experience Woolf's writing, speaking to them like a sister on a one-way telephone from the past. They explore the concept of time, of past lives and Galileo. They talk about, well, nuclear annihilation, it was a preoccupation of the era, but past lives and reincarnation, trying to live right so that you come back better. I think about my fear of motion, which I never could explain. Some other fool across the ocean years ago must have crashed his little airplane. Well, fear of flying is not an irrational fear, particularly these days. They actually talk about that a little in their scrap of a filler tune, Airplane. Up on an airplane, nearer, my God, to thee. They do not like being 30,000 feet in the air. To continue. How long till my soul gets it right? Can any human being ever reach that highlight? I call on the resting soul of Galileo, king of night vision, king of insight. Well, we've had their explorations of philosophy 4 years prostrate to the higher mind, who graded their performance and said he could see through them, got their paper, and they were free. They talk about it again in Jonas and Ezekiel. I used to search the reservations in native lands before I realized everywhere I stand there have been tribal feet running wild as fire, some past life brother of my desire. Jonas and Ezekiel, hear me now. Steady now and don't come out. I'm not ready for the dead to show its face. Whose angel are you anyway? Anyway. These are songs that seek context and attempt to weave their lives into all of history. This train, released Swampophilia in 1994, highlighted the connection with the Shoahs. Holocaust denialism was dared aloud. The trains taking who they took to the death camps. Certainly Jews, 6 million, yes, but also millions of Romani and queer people who were also at that end of the target range in the final solution. I saw this train as salvo against dehumanization, against othering. This is what happens when humanity is denied, when history is denied. Here's the problem. These artists are incredible. I will never be able to convey everything I want to about their music. What's struck me about it, long since given up holding any kind of structure for this discussion, but I've got to pull up 2 songs from their All That We Let In release from 2004. 2 songs in this LP seem to be having a kind of conversation with one another, and as I slowly became aware of the relationship between the two, or that I inferred between the two, this is definitely something I'd ask about if I'd been able to interview them. Looking at Fill It Up Again and Come On Home, sounds like a couple talking to each other across a divide, each with their own song. Discussion of transgressions in relationships often point to infidelity, a theme traced in both and elsewhere, and the poetry is very cool given the artists involved. Fill It Up Again gets the singer on down the road, fleeing, disgusted with the situation she finds herself in, and our biggest clue is this. I'd like to say that it was clear to me, love triangle geometry, but in the end it's still a mystery, the placement of affection and the disarray. I gathered up the courage that it took, made that bed and took one last look, and you can hear the pages flapping in the wind-blown book of my days, my days. You're the hole in my sky, you're my shrinking water supply, for my well runs dry. I'm going round, round, round the bend. Fill it up again. She needs to leave the situation. Does begin to have second thoughts. The break to clear her head was maybe all she needed, but back at home, another is thinking about the loss she is feeling, and also through the prism of infidelity. There is fire, and there is lust, Some would trade it all for someone they could trust. Here's a bag of silver for a box of nails. It's so simple, the betrayal, though it's known to change the world. What's to come? Come on home. The team you're hitched to has a mind of its own. It's just the forces of your past you've fought before. Come back here and shut the door. Stacking sandbags against the river of your troubles. Stepping ahead, you're all jammed up. The dam's about to burst. Pinning that for a moment and stepping out to say decades along they'll still trace biblical imagery as cultural touchstones, and I've never heard it woven like that. It's brilliant, and it minimizes the hurt, but at least acknowledges it. And second thoughts are happening with one, the means of reconciling floats beyond the reach of the other. I hear the owl in the night. I realize some things never are made right by some will. We string together here, days to months and months to years. What if everything we have adds up to nothing? Home. The team you're hitched to has a mind of its own, but it's just the forces of your past you fought before. Come back here and shut the door. The stacking sandbags against the river of your troubles. The other song spirals into this beautiful route I'm not likely to do justice, so please just take the advice of the outro. Track these songs down. I'm never going to approximate the heart and talent of these artists. Just go find this music, experience it for yourself. It's amazing. The song I originally chose as the title track for this piece, Burn All the Letters, also from Shaming the Sun. That was one I was also hoping I'd be able to find out more information about what this song is about. It touches on another recurring theme for them, which is writing things down and documentation. I was stocking items at work listening to this song on my MP3 player. I was very surprised to discover that I was crying. I didn't know who this song was about. I didn't know in whose voice they were singing or what context or capacity or loss or devastation of discovery, but I heard the fear of it, the fear of being discovered, found out, and I was like, okay, I guess I can relate to this. In the spring of 2011, a fast-moving flood swept across neighborhoods, homes, and businesses, covering thousands of acres in Minot, North Dakota, chopping the town in twain. My apartment was on North Hill, and my work was downtown, requiring an hours-long commute every day until the waters subsided weeks later. When they did, there were piles of debris up and down the streets throughout the city. Even after the waters receded enough we could walk it again, the sight was burned into my brain. Indeed, some of the disrepair is still in evidence years later. I endured the commute, the trash pileup, the smell, the simmering antipathy toward gestures vaguely. I was not okay, but I'd worked through some depression in 2006, and I knew this felt different. I was just sad all the time, and I traced it to feeling alone. I turned 40 the year before. I never had a relationship that lasted longer than half a year, and although I knew I'd experienced same-sex attraction for years as well, I'd only ever pursued relationships with women. So, in the fall of 2011, identifying this sadness and loneliness, I decided to create 2 dating profiles, one on eHarmony and one on a bear site I knew about but never had posted to. Reasoning I'd tried meeting people conventionally, it had never worked. Maybe try reaching out like this. Well, for one thing, eHarmony wanted money. They were confident their service was going to work, so they needed hundreds of dollars to provide it. I made my profile, and they were insistent women wanted to meet me, and for hundreds of dollars they would put me in touch with them. Alternately, the bear site I was looking for wanted like $30 for a 6-month membership, and yep, it took a while to finally meet up with anyone, but in the meantime I was chatting with guys all over the place, and I was absolutely feeling better about life. So yeah, I was finally exploring this part of my reality, and it certainly felt liberating, but I'm a repressed Middle Westerner and never breathed a word about being bisexual to anyone, and never had to. It seems, as happens occasionally, I was the last to know, but through a couple different connections, by mid-October of 2011, I had met Ralph online, and we started chatting with each other. And as of Thanksgiving, I was absolutely smitten, but I didn't dare say anything to my family. Well, I mean, we hadn't met. We just chatted online. I wanted to meet him in person. Oh, there was something there, because after all, I was still only a $300 check from meeting the woman of my dreams on eHarmony. Meanwhile, my folks are concerned about my loneliness and trying to maybe set me up with old kindergarten classmates they've run into here and there, and I'm like, I'm in love. I just don't dare tell you with whom. So, I think this song was speaking to me on a different level. Fear of discovery, fear of documentation. Burn all the letters. The government's on the phone. Burn all the letters. Send them on to a safer home. The native voices added a dimension that struck me listening to this song for this. Soldiers coming to plunder. They can't read what they cannot see. And once we'd met, once I knew my feelings were real beyond internet infatuation, once there was simply no space remaining to doubt or deny the reality of my feelings, obviously I told my folks about Ralph and introduced them, and that did not go well, and that's not even unusual. History is filled with unions one or the other set of parents disapproved. I think Shakespeare even explored something like that once, and our story may not rise to the level of Shakespeare, but over the course of a dozen years, we've built a life together, and however it started, whatever I learned about myself, and every feel I have felt, and whatever anyone else thinks about it, I have love in my life, and I'm happy. Closing out this discussion, one of the two songs I've got from their Come On Now Social release from 1999, Trouble, I've talked about, but this, I don't remember where I heard it, but I needed to buy it. Then I needed to buy it again, because it was one of the ones that didn't transfer properly in my collection, and I got a version featuring guest vocals by Joan Osborne that Apple Music says dates from 1987, but I don't believe that. Of course, I don't have better information anywhere else, but the LP said it was released with Come On Now Social in 1999, so I'ma believe that. Go tracks women's suffrage through Western expansion in a struggling economy. Through the Dust Bowl, through the dirt, Grandma was a suffragette, blacklisted for her publication, blacklisted for my generation. Go, go, go. That wasn't 24 words, and their power gets this song right down the road into feed the fire and fan the flame. I know you kids can stand the rain. I know you kids are still upsetters. The rock is cool, but the struggle is better. Go, go, go. Ties their condition, their situation, directly back to the earliest American voice, Abigail Adams advocating for women's rights as the nation was founded, to what's going on when this came out in 1999, to for abso-friggin-lutely what's going on right now. Did they tell you it was set in stone that you'd end up alone? Use your years to psych you out. You're too old to care, you're too young to count. Did they tell you you would come undone if you tried to touch the sun, undermine the underground? You're too old to care, you're too young to count. Go, go, go. end of each verse, end of the bridge, driving, strident, go, go, go. It's so empowering. I've been adding songs like these. Demi Lovato's Confident, Sia's Unstoppable. Go blows them both out of the water, not least for the essay quoted, only partially audible in the version I have, not always included in live performances, but ahead of the bridge, I'll read it out. We've got a spoken word passage from activist Meridel Lesueur's I Was Marching around 1934, which I'd never been able to make out entirely, so I'll share it here. Credit site Washburn EDU, and that link is in my show notes. The truth is, I was afraid. I felt inferior. I felt I excelled at competing with others and knew instantly that these people were not competing at all, that they were acting in a strange, powerful trance of movement together, and I was filled with longing to act with the fear that I could not. Powerful stuff, and I echo the sentiments on video posts in 2024. Where are the comments? Where are the shares? Track this down. Listen, watch, share. It is a fantastic sentiment of spare and elegant construction with a singular focus. I said this time, don't assume anything, just go, 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 go. And with that, time to get this one in the feed. Yes, sometime before this fall, perhaps, for reasons. Thank you all so much for checking in on me as I continue to poke around in my music collection. And as always, anything that might have reminded anyone of singing in this or any Video Fuzzy production, let me assure you that it wasn't. Any low-bar karaoke attempts you may have encountered in this tiny little indie project would only have been included for illustrative purposes as part of fair use review, and certainly weren't meant to infringe on anyone's licensing, copyright, or distribution agreements. Go forth, buy songs that support the artists you love. Meanwhile, please add, follow, and subscribe to Video Fuzzy, the soundtrack where your podcast. You can check out my more media-centered commentary over on Video Fuzzy, and with any questions, comments, or artist suggestions, please contact me through my show notes or by email to tjamon1970@yahoo.com. For Video Fuzzy, the soundtrack, I'm Terry J. Amon. Happy listening!